Forgery is the act of making something fake and trying to pass it as real. It can be a painting, a signature, money, or even a passport. At first, it may sound simple, but forgery is a deep and dangerous world. It is not just about copying something. It is about understanding it so well that no one can tell the difference. Long ago, people started forging things for many reasons. Some wanted money, others wanted power, and some simply enjoyed the challenge of tricking others. Over time, forgery became more advanced, more secret, and more risky. In the early days, forgery was often linked to art. Painters would copy the work of famous artists and sell it as original. These copies were not always bad. In fact, some were so good that even experts could not tell they were fake. A skilled forger could study the brushstrokes, the colors, and even the type of canvas used. They would learn how the original artist lived and worked. They would practice for years just to get one painting right. When they were ready, they would release the fake into the market, where it could sell for a huge amount of money. At the same time, forgery was also happening in documents. Kings and leaders used seals and signatures to prove their power. Forgers saw this as an opportunity. They learned how to copy these marks and create fake documents. A forged letter could start a war or stop one. A fake land document could make someone rich overnight. Because of this, forgery was seen as a serious crime. If someone was caught, the punishment was often very harsh. But even with the risk, people continued to do it. As time went on, forgery became more organized. It was no longer just one person working alone. Groups began to form, sharing skills and tools. One person might be good at drawing, another at writing, and another at finding buyers. Together, they created a network that was hard to stop. These groups worked in secret places, often moving from one city to another to avoid being caught. They trusted very few people because one mistake could destroy everything. In this hidden world, there were also rules. Forgers had to be careful about who they worked with. Trust was important, but it was also dangerous. Many forgers were caught not because of their work, but because someone betrayed them. Money could make people greedy, and greed could lead to mistakes. Still, the rewards were tempting. A single successful forgery could bring in more money than years of honest work. One of the most interesting things about forgery is the skill involved. A good forger is not just a criminal. They're also an artist, a thinker, and a planner. They must pay attention to every detail. The paper must feel right. The ink must look old. The signature must match perfectly. Even the smallest mistake can raise suspicion. Because of this, many forgers spend years learning and improving their craft. They study history, art, and science. They experiment with different tools and materials. They test their work again and again until it is perfect. But forgery is not just about making fake things. It is also about telling a story. Every forged item must have a history. If someone asks where a painting came from, there must be an answer. If a passport is checked, it must have records that match. Forgers often create entire backgrounds for their work. They invent names, dates, and places. They build a world around the fake so that it feels real. This is what makes forgery so powerful and so dangerous. In modern times, technology has changed the world of forgery. Machines can print high-quality copies. Computers can create realistic designs. But this does not mean the old skills are gone. In fact, some forgers combine old methods with new tools. They use technology to study and plan, but still rely on their hands to create the final product. This mix of old and new makes forgery even harder to detect. Despite all this, forgery is always a risky game. There are experts whose job is to find fakes. They study the same details as the forgers, but with a different goal. They look for mistakes, no matter how small. A tiny difference in color, a slight change in handwriting, or an unusual material can expose a forgery. When that happens, the truth comes out, and the consequences can be severe. Still, the world of forgery continues to grow. New opportunities appear as the world changes. New systems can be exploited. New people can be fooled. And in the shadows, there are always those who are ready to take the risk. They work quietly, patiently, and carefully, always staying one step ahead. But as this story begins, there is one case that stands out from all the others. A case that starts with something simple, but slowly reveals a much bigger and more dangerous secret waiting to unfold in ways no one expects. The world of fake art is quiet, secret, and full of hidden danger. At first, it looks beautiful and harmless. Paintings hang in galleries, collectors admire them, and buyers spend large amounts of money to own them. But behind some of these paintings lies a different truth. Not every masterpiece is real. Some are carefully made copies, created by skilled hands that know exactly how to deceive the eye. These are not simple copies made for practice. They are forgeries, designed to fool even the most experienced experts. Forging a painting is not easy. A forger must first choose an artist to copy. Most of the time, they pick famous artists whose work is already valuable. The more famous the artist, the higher the price their paintings can sell for. This makes the risk worth it for the forger. But copying a famous artist is not just about painting something that looks similar. It requires deep study. The forger must learn how the artist used colors, how they held their brush, and how they created texture on the canvas. Every small detail matters. Many forgers spend years studying before they even try to create a fake painting. They visit museums, read books, and watch how experts talk about art. They learn the history behind each piece. They understand the time period, the materials used, and even how the painting has aged over time. This knowledge helps them create something that not only looks real, but also feels real. A good forgery is not just seen, it is believed. One of the most difficult parts of forging art is making the painting look old. Real paintings change over time. The colors may fade, the surface may crack, and the canvas may weaken. Forgers have to copy these signs of age. Some use special chemicals to create cracks. Others use old canvases taken from damaged paintings. They may even expose the painting to heat or light to make it look older. These methods are risky, but they can make a fake painting look very convincing. Another important part of art forgery is the story behind the painting. This is called provenance. It is the history that shows where the painting has been and who has owned it. Without a strong story, even a perfect painting can raise suspicion. Forgers often create fake documents to support their work. They may invent previous owners, fake gallery records, or even create old letters that mention the painting. This adds another layer of deception, making it harder for buyers to question the truth. Once the painting is ready, the next step is selling it. This is where things become even more dangerous. The forger cannot simply walk into a gallery and sell the painting directly. They often work with middlemen, people who help sell the artwork without asking too many questions. These middlemen may not always know the painting is fake, or they may choose to ignore the signs. The painting then moves through different hands, each step making it seem more real. Some fake paintings have even made their way into famous galleries and museums. Experts have been fooled, sometimes for many years. It is only later, after careful testing or new information, that the truth comes out. When this happens, it can cause shock and embarrassment. Collectors lose money, museums lose trust, and the name of the forger may slowly come to light. But by then, the forger is often already gone, moving on to the next project. There is also a strange side to art forgery. Some forgers do not see themselves as criminals. They see themselves as artists who are proving a point. They believe that if people cannot tell the difference between a real painting and a fake one, then what truly gives art its value? Is it the skill, or is it the name behind it? This way of thinking does not make forgery right, but it shows how complex the world of fake art can be. At the same time, the pressure in this world keeps growing. As technology improves, so do the tools used to detect fakes. Experts now use machines to test paint, analyze brushstrokes, and study the materials used. These tests can reveal details that the human eye cannot see. Because of this, forgers must become even more careful. One small mistake can destroy years of work. Despite the risks, the world of fake art continues to exist. There are still buyers willing to take chances, and still forgers willing to create. The money involved is simply too great to ignore. And as long as there is demand, there will always be someone ready to supply. But behind every successful forgery, there is a hidden story, one of patience, skill, and deception that goes deeper than anyone expects. And as the lines between real and fake continue to blur, the story begins to shift beyond paintings and galleries, moving into something even more personal, where identity itself can be copied, altered, and used in ways that make the stakes far more dangerous than a simple piece of art hanging on a wall. Forgery does not stop at paintings. It moves into something far more personal: identity. While a fake painting can fool collectors and experts, a fake identity can fool entire systems. This is where forgery becomes even more dangerous. Instead of copying art, the forger now copies people. Names, faces, signatures, and official records all become part of the deception. In this world, a simple piece of paper, like a passport or an ID card, can change a person's life completely. A passport is one of the most powerful documents a person can have. It allows someone to travel across borders, enter new countries, and prove who they are. Because of this, passports are also one of the most targeted items for forgery. Criminals, smugglers, and even people trying to escape danger may look for fake passports. A skilled forger knows this and understands how valuable a perfect fake can be. But creating one is not simple. It requires careful attention to detail and a deep understanding of how official documents are made. Unlike paintings, which are judged by human eyes, passports are checked by machines and trained officers. This makes the job harder. A forger must copy not only the look of the document but also its hidden features. Modern passports include special paper, watermarks, holograms, and digital chips. These features are designed to prevent forgery, but skilled forgers study them closely. Some try to copy these features, while others find ways to bypass them. They may use stolen blank passports, alter real documents, or create high-quality replicas using advanced tools. Forging identity is not just about making a document. It is about building a full life around that document. If someone uses a fake passport, they must also have a matching story. Their name, age, place of birth, and travel history must all make sense. If an officer asks questions, the answers must be clear and confident. Any hesitation can raise suspicion. This is why many forgers work closely with the people who use their documents. They train them, guide them, and sometimes even create complete backgrounds for them. The reasons for using fake identities are many. Some people use them to escape the law. Others use them to move across borders without being tracked. There are also cases where people use fake identities to commit crimes like fraud or theft. In more serious cases, fake passports can be used by dangerous groups to move freely between countries. This is why governments take identity forgery very seriously. It is not just a crime, it can also be a threat to national security. Because of this, the systems used to check identity have become more advanced. Airports now use biometric scans, such as fingerprints and facial recognition. These systems are harder to fool because they rely on physical features that are unique to each person. But even here, forgers continue to adapt. Some try to alter appearances, while others find ways to trick the systems. It becomes a constant battle between those trying to protect identity and those trying to break it. In the middle of this world, there are people who specialize in different parts of identity forgery. One person may focus on creating the physical document. Another may handle digital records. A third may deal with finding clients and arranging deals. This division of work makes the operation more efficient, but also more complex. Each person plays a role, and if one part fails, the entire system can collapse. There is also a strong sense of risk in this type of forgery. Unlike fake art, which may go unnoticed for years, fake identities are often tested immediately. A person using a forged passport may face checks at airports, borders, and security points. One mistake, one wrong detail, or one suspicious officer can lead to arrest. The consequences are serious, often leading to long prison sentences. Despite this, the demand for fake identities continues to grow. Technology has made things both easier and harder for forgers. On one hand, advanced printers and software allow for high-quality copies. On the other hand, digital databases and tracking systems make it easier to detect fraud. Governments share information, making it harder for someone to use the same fake identity in different places. This forces forgers to constantly change their methods, always staying one step ahead. What makes identity forgery even more unsettling is how it affects trust. In daily life, people rely on documents to prove who they are. When those documents can be faked, it creates doubt. It becomes harder to know what is real and what is not. This doubt spreads through systems, making everything more uncertain. It also shows how powerful forgery can be, not just in money or art, but in the very idea of identity. As the story continues, the focus begins to narrow. Among the many people working in this hidden world, one individual starts to stand out. Someone who understands both art and identity, someone who has mastered the skill of copying not just objects, but entire lives. Their work is precise, their methods are careful, and their success begins to attract attention. But with attention comes danger, and as their name slowly rises in the shadows, so does the risk that everything they have built could begin to fall apart in ways they never expected. In the hidden world of forgery, where skill and secrecy mean everything, one name slowly began to stand out. No one knew the person's real identity. Some called him an artist, others called him a ghost. But among those who understood the trade, he was known as a master. He did not rush his work, and he did not make careless mistakes. Every piece he created, whether it was a painting or a passport, carried a level of detail that made people question what was real and what was not. His rise was not sudden. It was built over years of quiet learning, careful planning, and a deep understanding of how the world worked. He started small, like many others. At first, he copied simple documents, school certificates, local ID cards, and small permits. These were not perfect, but they were good enough to pass basic checks. With each job, he learned something new. He noticed how paper felt different depending on where it came from. He studied how ink reacted to time, light, and pressure. Slowly, his work improved. What began as rough copies soon turned into near-perfect replicas. People started to notice, and word spread quietly among those who needed such skills. But what made him different from others was not just his technical ability. It was his patience. He did not take every job that came his way. He chose carefully, often turning down offers that seemed too risky. He believed that one mistake could destroy everything he had built. This mindset allowed him to stay hidden while others were caught. As his reputation grew, so did the level of work he accepted. He moved from simple documents to more complex ones, including official records and eventually passports. When he entered the world of passport forgery, everything changed. This was no longer small work. It required precision at the highest level. He studied real passports for months before attempting his first one. He learned about security features, printing methods, and the structure of official systems. He did not just copy what he saw. He tried to understand why things were made the way they were. This deeper knowledge gave him an advantage. While others focused on appearance, he focused on function. His workspace was simple but carefully arranged. There were no signs that anything illegal was happening. To an outsider, it might look like a small studio or workshop. But inside, every tool had a purpose. Special printers, different types of paper, chemicals, and old documents were all kept in order. He worked mostly at night, when there were fewer distractions. Each project was handled with care, often taking days or even weeks to complete. He believed that speed was the enemy of perfection. Over time, he began to combine his skills in art and identity forgery. This is where his work became truly unique. He could create a painting with a believable history, and then create documents to support that history. He could design a fake identity, and then produce records that made it appear real in official systems. This ability to connect different parts of forgery made him highly valuable. People were willing to pay large amounts for his work, and he became selective about who he worked with. Despite his success, he remained cautious. He avoided direct contact with clients, using trusted middlemen instead. These middlemen handled communication, delivery, and payment. This added a layer of protection, making it harder for anyone to trace the work back to him. He also changed locations often, never staying in one place for too long. This constant movement made it difficult for anyone to track him, but it also meant he lived a life without stability. As his work became more advanced, so did the risks. Governments were improving their systems, making it harder to create convincing forgeries. New technologies were introduced, and checks became more detailed. But instead of slowing down, he adapted. He studied these new systems and found ways to work around them. He believed that every system, no matter how strong, had a weakness. All it took was time and patience to find it. There were moments when things almost went wrong. A document that took longer than expected, a client who asked too many questions, a delivery that nearly failed. Each of these moments reminded him of the danger he was in, but he learned from them. He adjusted his methods, tightened his rules, and became even more careful. To him, survival depended on constant improvement. Yet, as his name spread further, something began to change. More people wanted to work with him, including individuals he did not trust. Some offered large sums of money for urgent jobs. Others tried to push him into taking risks he would normally avoid. The pressure slowly increased, testing his discipline. At the same time, unknown to him, his work had started to attract attention from another side, people who were not interested in buying, but in finding and stopping him. Small details began to connect. Patterns in documents, similarities in style, and repeated methods started to form a trail. It was faint, almost invisible, but it was there. And while he continued to work in the shadows, confident in his skill and careful planning, the space around him was slowly beginning to close in ways he could not yet see, setting the stage for something far more dangerous than any risk he had faced before. The first signs of trouble did not come loudly. There were no sudden arrests or public warnings. Instead, it began quietly, with small observations made by people trained to notice details others would ignore. In different parts of the world, officials started to see documents that felt just slightly off. At first glance, everything looked correct. The design, the material, even the hidden features. But something about them did not sit right. It was not one big mistake, but many tiny ones that, when seen together, raised concern. These documents appeared in different places but shared subtle similarities. The texture of the paper, the way the ink settled, and the precision of certain details all pointed to the same skilled hand. Experts began to compare notes. They looked at samples side by side, studying patterns that most people would never notice. Slowly, a picture began to form. This was not random work. It was controlled, careful, and consistent. It was the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. A small team was formed to investigate further. They were not ordinary officers. Each member had a specific skill. Some were experts in document analysis, able to detect the smallest differences in materials. Others focused on digital systems, tracking how identities move through databases. There were also those who understood criminal networks, people who knew how information traveled in hidden circles. Together, they began to follow the trail, piece by piece. At first, progress was slow. The person they were looking for left very little behind. There were no names, no clear locations, and no direct connections. Everything was done through layers, middlemen, false identities, and secure channels. This made it difficult to trace anything back to the source. But the team did not rush. They understood that patience was key. Just like the forger they were chasing, they worked carefully, building their case step by step. One of the first breakthroughs came from a mistake that seemed too small to matter. In one document, there was a slight inconsistency in the way a number was printed. It was almost perfect, but not quite. This small detail matched a similar issue found in another document from a different country. It was not enough to prove anything on its own, but it gave the investigators something to follow. They began to search for more examples, looking for patterns that could connect the cases. As more documents were examined, the pattern became clearer. The same level of precision, the same methods, and even the same minor flaws appeared again and again. It was like a signature, hidden in plain sight. The team realized they were dealing with a single source, a master forger who had been operating across borders without being detected. This discovery changed everything. The investigation became more focused, more urgent. At the same time, efforts were made to track the people using these forged documents. Some were stopped at airports, others during routine checks. When questioned, many of them did not know who had created their documents. They had received them through contacts, often paying large sums of money. These contacts, when traced, led to more layers, more middlemen, more false leads. It was like chasing a shadow that kept moving just out of reach. Still, each step brought the team closer. They began to map out the network, identifying key points where information passed through. Communication channels were monitored, and certain patterns started to appear. There were times when activity increased suddenly, followed by periods of silence. These changes suggested that the forger was cautious, possibly aware that something was happening. This made the situation more tense. If he sensed danger, he could disappear completely. To prevent this, the team decided to act carefully. They did not want to alert him too soon. Instead, they focused on gathering as much information as possible. They studied past cases, looking for any detail that could lead them to his location or identity. They also worked with international agencies, sharing information and coordinating efforts. This cooperation made the investigation stronger, but it also increased the pressure to succeed. Meanwhile, the forger continued his work, unaware of how close the investigation was getting. Or perhaps he sensed something but chose to ignore it, trusting in his methods and experience. Either way, the gap between him and the investigators was shrinking. Every document he created added to the evidence. Every transaction, no matter how small, left a trace. The tension grew as both sides moved closer to a moment that would change everything. The investigators were no longer just collecting information. They were preparing for action. Plans were discussed, strategies formed, and roles assigned. They knew that when the time came, there would be little room for error. The forger was careful and experienced. If given even a small chance, he could escape. And so, as the final pieces began to fall into place, the quiet investigation that started with small doubts was now turning into something much bigger. The search was no longer about finding patterns. It was about finding the person behind them and bringing an end to a hidden operation that had managed to stay out of sight for far too long, even as one last move from either side could decide how it all unfolds. The final stage of the investigation did not begin with noise or sudden action. It began with certainty. After months of careful work, the team had gathered enough evidence to believe they were close. The patterns were clear, the network was mapped, and the small mistakes left behind had formed a trail that pointed in one direction. Still, they knew they were dealing with someone highly skilled, someone who had avoided capture for years. This would not be simple, and one wrong move could cause everything to fall apart. The breakthrough came from a combination of patience and timing. A communication channel that had been quietly monitored showed unusual activity. Messages were being sent more frequently, and there were signs that a large transaction was being prepared. This was not routine work. It suggested urgency and possibly pressure. The team saw this as an opportunity. If they acted at the right moment, they could catch the forger while he was still active, before he had time to disappear again. A plan was carefully put into place. Every detail was considered. Different teams were assigned roles, each one responsible for a specific part of the operation. Some would track movement, others would monitor communication, and a smaller group would be ready to move in when the signal was given. The goal was not just to stop one transaction, but to find the person behind everything, the one who had stayed hidden for so long. As the operation began, tension filled every moment. Time seemed slower, and every update mattered. The communication they had been watching led them to a location that did not seem unusual at first. It was quiet, almost ordinary, the kind of place that would not attract attention. But that was exactly what made it suspicious. Someone who worked in secrecy would choose a place like this, somewhere that blended in with everything around it. Inside, the master forger was working as he always had, calm, focused, and careful. He had done this many times before. Every step was planned, every movement controlled. But something was different this time. The pressure had been building, and even though he had not made any obvious mistakes, the small changes in his routine had created an opening. The increased activity, the urgency in his work, and the slight adjustments in his process had all added up in ways he had not fully noticed. When the moment came, it was quick. The team moved in with precision, surrounding the location and securing every exit. There was no chaos, no confusion. Everything happened as planned. Inside, the forger realized what was happening, but there was little he could do. Years of careful work, of staying hidden and avoiding mistakes, had led to this single moment. The space that once felt safe was now closed, and the options he had relied on were gone. The evidence found inside told the full story. Tools, materials, unfinished documents, and records all confirmed what the investigators had believed. This was not just a skilled individual. It was the center of a large and complex operation. Every detail showed the level of precision and effort that had gone into the work. It also showed the impact. Documents linked to different countries, identities used in various situations, and connections to people who had relied on his work for many reasons. As the truth came out, the scale of the operation became clear. It was not just about money or skill. The forged documents had been used in ways that affected real lives. Some had allowed people to cross borders unnoticed. Others had been used in crimes that caused harm. The work of one person had spread far beyond what could be seen at first, reaching into systems that depend on trust and accuracy. For the investigators, the case was a success, but it also left questions behind. How many forgeries had gone undetected? How many others were still out there, working in the same shadows? The arrest of one master did not end the world of forgery. It only revealed how deep and complex it truly was. There would always be others, learning, adapting, and trying to stay one step ahead. For the forger, the outcome was different. The skill that had once given him control now stood as evidence against him. Every detail he had perfected became part of the case that proved his actions. The patience and discipline that had helped him rise were no longer enough to protect him. In the end, it was not a single big mistake that brought him down, but a series of small ones that slowly built over time. The story of forgery, from paintings to passports, is not just about deception. It is about the balance between creation and truth, between skill and responsibility. It shows how something that begins as talent can turn into something dangerous when used in the wrong way. It also shows how systems built on trust can be tested, and sometimes broken, by those who understand them too well. And even as this chapter comes to an end, the larger story continues in quiet places, in hidden rooms, and in the careful hands of those who are still learning the art of imitation, reminding us that the line between what is real and what is fake is not always as clear as it seems, and that somewhere, at any given moment, another story may already be beginning.